Swayam. Digital India. Educated India.
We start with the argmax expression for probability of tag sequence given the word sequence. And last time that we focus our attention on every position, and for that position the words, pause tags, properties of the words, parts of the words, they form what is called the history. So the best possible tag sequence is argmaxing on probability of Ti given Hi, I going from 1 to n, where 1 to n includes the sentence beginner and sentence finisher also. So at every position we are interested in this quantity, probability of Ti given Hi. So this Hi is called history. That term has stayed from Ratnaparke's time, his paper, then later Manning and Trutanova. So this term remained. And then we are interested in finding out this probability. And probability of Ti given Hi is modeled as e to the power lambda j fj, where fj is the jth feature, and that is being considered at the ith position. Okay, so we sum over all these features, multiplying them by the weight. So the expression that we obtain is probability of Ti given Hi is e to the power sigma j equal to 1 to k, lambda j fj Ti Hi divided by z, where z is the normalizing factor, converting this quantity to a probability value. And what is z? Z is the same quantity in the numerator. Only thing is that this quantity is summed over all possible tags from the tag repository. So if I talk about part of speech tagging, then it is all possible tags in the tag repository. Universal tags, there are 12 tags. Pen tree bank tag, about 40 tags. And if it is the simplified chunking problem, then Ti dash takes only two values, B and I, beginning of the chunk and inside the chunk. So for chunking, denominator will have only two expressions, A plus B, where A is for B and B is for I. Okay, so two quantities only in the denominator. So this is the way the probability at a position for Ti given Hi is expressed. And what is the basis of this expression? How did we arrive at this? One method will be like, going by whatever is common knowledge. So what is the number of heads given n tosses? Let's suppose k is the number of heads given n tosses. Then the probability of head is k by n. Okay, this is a statement which does not go deeper, which doesn't ask any further questions. So here also we could have taken the stand that the probability is modeled as an exponential distribution divided by a normalizing factor. But for those of you who are more mathematically inclined and would like to ask more basic principles, this comes from the following considerations. First of all, we want to maximize the entropy of the situation. Okay, maximize the entropy of the situation with the constraint that the expected value of the features is equal to from the model is equal to the expected value of the features empirically. So what I mean to say here is that my model comes out to be an exponential distribution, but there are these feature values. Okay, there are these feature values, and the expectation of the feature value will be the probability of the feature value multiplied by the value of the feature value, okay, summed over all possible values. So I'm coming from the definition of mathematical expectation. Now if the feature value takes only 0 or 1, does the word have shun or not? Okay, I'm just taking this example. Does the word have shun or not? This 1 if it has, 0 otherwise, then the values are 1 and 0. In this case, the expected value of the feature is same as the probability of value of the feature. 0 multiplied by the probability value gives you 0. So in those cases where the value is 1 or 0 binary, many of the feature values fall into that category. Okay, does the word have a property or not? Does the current position have a noun part of speech tag or not? So those 0, 1 values make the situation somewhat convenient. That probability value is same as the expectation value. So if that is the case, then we have to find out the probability of the feature. Now, what is the probability that the word ends in shun? What is the probability that the word ends in shun? So if you want to go to the corpus and find out that probability, that is called the empirical probability. Okay, that is called the empirical probability. So here you can simply count the number of words which end in shun. Of course, taking care that the word indeed has a suffix shun, where the onus of correctness is on the morphological processor. So that's clear, right? So you can get the empirical estimate of the expectation of shun words by simply counting the number of words which end in shun divided by the total number of words in the corpus. That is the empirical estimate. And we want it to be equal to the model predicted expectation. Now the model predicted expectation is controlled by a probability, the probability of Ti given Hi at any position, probability of Ti given Hi at any position. Now the probability of the feature can be linked with the probability of Ti given Hi. Okay. Now if you know these parameter probabilities, then you can create a entropy expression, just like we created an entropy expression for a coin which is not tossed, but we want to estimate the probability of the coin. So the entropy of a distribution is nothing but the sum of the negative sum of the probability values multiplied by log of those probability values. You can carry out the same operation, and that will give you the mathematical expectation of the feature predicted by the model. So that should be equal to the empirical expectation from the training data. Okay, so get the big picture: empirical expectation from the training data, model predicted expectation. Okay, so these two should match, and if you apply that constraint and take the derivative of the entropy expression, equate it to 0, then you will be arriving at this modeling for the parameters P of Ti given Hi. You will arrive at this, okay? And I request the TA team to put this as an exercise. This is an extremely valuable, insightful exercise into the theory of conditional random field and maximum entropy Markov model. In fact, it is useful for any kind of discriminative modeling to do this task. Okay, so TA team, please put this as an exercise. The exercise is show that the probability of Ti given Hi becomes e to the power the sum of weighted features divided by normalizing factor if we insist that the entropy is maximized and the model prediction for expected value of feature is equal to the empirical value of the expected value of the feature. So this is the guiding equation for modeling, and the modeling comes out to be very nice. E to the power sum of weighted features values divided by a normalizing factor, which also is sum of exponents of this weighted sum of feature values. Okay. So now what happens is that we have come to a situation where we can get this probability value completely if we know the lambdas. Okay, so these lambdas are the weight values of the features, and this is what is to be estimated. Now, please do not get confused with neural network kind of modeling of probability, deep learning based modeling of probability, which happens at the outermost layer, penultimate layer through softmax functions, etc. You probably heard of those terms. Okay, I do not want to jump the gun, but I would like to say that this kind of estimate, which happens in neural network, is not a parametric estimate. Okay, parametric estimate comes from the parameters which appear in the distribution expression. So let us take a note of an important statement I'm making. That important statement is that in machine learning situation there are three entities: the data, the model, and the distribution. The data, the model, and the distribution. Now, if the distribution is assumed, then the distribution has parameter. For example, if I say that the data follows normal distribution, then it has mean and standard deviation. Okay, in this case, the probability is modeled by an exponential expression, and here the parameter is lambda value. The model parameter is not the concern in parametric estimation. Model parameter, okay. The neural network which is trained, and there are weight values in this. This is not really the distribution parameter. Okay, distribution is not known. So this lambda j's, if I know the weights of the feature values, then I know this probabilistic expression, and then I can find out the probability of the string, level of the string in a test situation. So now the question is, how do I get these lambda values? Okay, what is the technique for that? Remember, what is given to me is this. Okay, what is given to me is this corpus. So I have the words: he reckons the current account deficit will narrow to only 1.8 billion in September. So I have the words here: he reckons the current account, etc. And I have the part of speech tags: PRP, VVZ, DT, JJ, NN, etc. I also have the property information and the part information for the words. Okay, all these are obtained. So chunking is the third level. Part of speech tagging has been done, morphology analysis has been done. Now we are doing chunking, and we are discussing a simplified chunking problem. So BNP is not there, only B. Then BBI. BBI means reckons the current account. No, so BII, sorry, BIII. So B and three I's, the current account deficit. So this is the training corpus given to me. Okay, now from this training corpus, I want to find out the lambda values. So whole concern is now to find out lambda values. So we have to use a method called gradient descent. Now for finding out these lambda values, people have used many techniques: LBGF, then iterative scaling, generalized iterative scaling, and so on. But what has been found to be successful, or which works really effectively, is the gradient descent. So let us discuss gradient descent. So I have the probability of Ti given Hi expression. I take logarithm. Then I have a linear expression in Fj, lambda j, and I have minus log z because z was in the denominator. Okay, and e to the power, this sum has now become a linear expression. Log and e have absorbed each other. I have minus log z, and z of course is this summation over all possible tags of this exponential expression. So this is my expression, and now I call this as xn. Log of p t I given hi equal to sigma j equal to 1 to k lambda j n f j t I hi minus log z n. What is n doing here? N is giving me the iteration, okay, iteration number. So there is an iterative algorithm where all the lambdas are initialized, okay, and after initialization we apply gradient descent to get the next value of lambda. We are coming to that very soon. Now this lambda values appear in probability of Ti given Hi expression, okay, and that log of P Ti given Hi, I call it xn, the value of x at the nth iteration. And what is x? X is this log of probability Ti given Hi. So this is the expression I have in front of me, and n refers to the iteration number. Xn is the value at the nth iteration. Okay, so now I apply the gradient descent principle. Our goal is to find out the lambda j's. And the closed form expression is not really possible. You have to do a lot of algebraic work. So the way this is done is I take the lambda j value. So lambda j n plus 1 is equal to lambda j n minus eta into delta xn delta delta lambda j. This lambda j is also at the nth iteration. Okay, so this is called the gradient descent principle. You take the function which is a function of a parameter. You want to estimate the new value of the parameter. That is found out by taking the previous value and subtracting the derivative of the function with respect to that parameter multiplied by a constant. We call this the learning rate or the updation rate. Okay, so this is our guiding controlling equation. Lambda j n plus 1 is lambda j n minus updation rate into partial derivative of the function with respect to the parameter. This is our guiding equation. So please verify that you are seeing this gradient descent equation, lambda j n plus 1. So
So,
this, yeah,
in this, the lambda is the distribution parameter, right?
yeah, the weight of the feature function, weights of the features.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So if we know the lambda values, we know the whole probability expression, Pti given Hi. Okay. So this is the way the problem is formulated, and gradient descent is a very well established algorithm. It goes to a local minimum. It is guaranteed to go to a local minimum, and if the function is convex, then the local minimum is also global minimum. Again, I am throwing some terms and making a statement without proof, but you know, these things are very well established, and you should at least hear them and convince them of their correctness later. So this is how the training will be done to find out the lambda values. Now let us concretize our discussion and see how far we have come. We will be applying gradient descent on the training data. What is given to me is these b and I values on the training data. Okay, b and I values on the training data, and I have p ti given hi for every position, every ith position. Okay, and how many positions are there? There are as many positions as the corpus size. Okay, at every position we have word and the pause and the properties and the history information at that position. The history information consists of the word, the part of speech tag, morphological information. So at every position I have this probability value. At every position I have an expression consisting of the lambda values and the feature values. The feature values are known. I need to find out the lambda values. Okay, so that is my problem. And I find out lambda values iteratively by making use of this expression. Okay, now there are tools who do it for you. I have sent a message on WhatsApp, which will be also on Teams and Moodle, that you can look at the mallet tool. Mallet tool actually implements this training algorithm for you for conditional random fill and maximum entropy Markov model also. Okay, so you can find out. Now it is an instructive exercise to see what will be the complexity of this training algorithm. Okay, what is the amount of computation that is needed. So suppose you have a corpus of size 1 million. Okay, 1 million size corpus. So that means you have 10 lakh words on the corpus, and therefore there are, without nitpicking, without sentence beginner, ender, etc., we have approximately 10 lakh positions. And each of these 10 lakh positions have probability of Ti given Hi value. The lambda value, however, doesn't really change from position to position. So lambda value is for the whole corpus. Okay. Now the lambda value you will be able to find with respect to each position, and this will be modified after every iteration. Okay. The algorithm will run over the whole training corpus, and for each lambda value compute a gradient descent algorithm to finally converge to a lambda value. So this is a very time consuming affair. Okay, it is a very time consuming affair. It will take many iterations over a huge amount of corpus, and people have reported training of conditional random field or maximum entropy Markov model is an involved affair. It takes a long time to get those lambda values. And if you compare this with hidden Markov model, what do you see? Hidden Markov model, you simply take ratio of counts. The probability of the count of next tag preceded by previous tag divided by number of previous tags. Okay. You simply take ratio of counts. In your assignment you have seen this. So that is a very fast operation. You just have a scan over the whole corpus and you get this done. But in iterative gradient descent, you will have to go through the corpus many times, go over the corpus many times, okay, and run this gradient descent until convergence, until all the lambda values don't change. So that takes time. It is a more involved operation. What are you gaining from this? You are gaining from this a framework in which you can make use of the corpus. Okay, so do make use of the tool for any kind of feature based training and testing, but be aware of the theoretical underpinnings and do the exercises that are being mentioned in the class. Okay, so this is how gradient descent will work over the whole corpus. But this is parametric estimation. Okay, you get the lambda values from the training corpus. Now I change gear completely and take you to a non-parametric situation where the non-parametric situation is consisting of neural network. Okay, the gradient descent is applied to a non-parametric situation where a neural network is trained. Okay, so we have been holding back neural network for some time, but it is okay to introduce such a popular framework now and go on developing this as we go along. So in a neural network based gradient descent algorithm for tuning the parameters, mind you, these parameters are the weight values in the neural network. They are not parameters of a known distribution function. So it's a non-parametric situation. So we would like to estimate the values of these weights, which are weights of connections between different neurons. Okay. Now we have changed the gear completely. No MEMM, no chunking, nothing. we are just looking at a gradient descent situation, which is probably the most famous and most popular gradient descent situation, the backpropagation algorithm. So we'll systematically do deep learning as we go along, but these ideas are not very difficult to absorb in relation to the parametric estimation that we have done. So a neural network of many layers consists of what are called neurons. Okay, these circles are called neurons. Okay, so what they do is that they receive the input and produce an output. In between there are many layers. They are called hidden layers. These layers are hidden because they do not interact with the environment. They neither receive output nor give output. So one layer is the output layer, one layer is the input layer. So they are the input and output layers. The layers in between are called hidden layers, and the layers starting from the first hidden layer up to the output layer are called computation layers. Okay, they do computation. And what do they compute? They simply take the sum of the inputs multiplied by the connection weights and pass it through a nonlinearity. That nonlinearity is often a sigmoid function. Okay, sigmoid function. So again, some terms are being thrown, but they will become, bread and butter for you, and you will be very comfortable with these terms. So each neuron essentially sums up the output from the previous layer's neuron, multiplies them after multiplying them by weights, and passes it through a nonlinearity. Okay, so this happens, and the gradient descent that is applied in this situation is that the change in weight, here is the weight, I'm interested in this particular weight, the change in weight is equal to minus eta delta E delta W J I, where E is called the error function or the loss function. So what is happening here is that I am interested to obtain a particular weight at the output layer, but what I observe as output is different from the target output I want. Okay, so then I compute the error between the observed output and the target output. Okay, I find I have an expression for this error. So that expression is also called the loss function. Now, this loss function or the error function is a function of the parameter value Wji. As you change the weight value for the same input and for the same target output, the error will reduce or increase. So since it is Wji which is influencing E, I am taking the gradient descent with respect to E and Wji. So this is identical to what we wrote for lambda j. So this is delta Wji means Wji at the n plus 1th iteration minus Wji at the nth iteration is nothing but eta into delta E delta Wj. That is the gradient of E with respect to Wji. So now why gradient? Negative gradient? Because that ensures the movement in the steepest descent direction. So that's why the gradient descent technique is guaranteed to give you a local minimum and convex function global minimum. So this is the method by which the parameter values are changed. The parameter, by the way, is not the parameter of a distribution function, but the weight values of a neural network. But principle wise, there is no difference, absolutely. Okay, two functions are taken. In case of non-parametric, the loss function. In case of parametric, the probability modeling function. Okay, but the principle is same. So now there is a mathematical work involved where the loss function, derivative of the loss function, is expressed in terms of the derivative of the loss function with respect to the net input multiplied by the net input divided by multiplied by the derivative of the net input with respect to the parameter. Okay, so there is this mathematical work at the end of which, okay, because we'll do back propagation in a lot of detail, at the end of which I arrive at a nice expression where the change in parameter comes out to be equal to learning rate into a quantity called delta J into OI. So what are J and I? J is the destination neuron, I is the source neuron. Okay, so I understand that a lot of new things are being told to you, and you are probably a bit, bit overwhelmed with all these concepts. But the main idea is very simple, that you iteratively find out the weight value, and every time you change the weight, you change it by this quantity. Now this quantity is the learning rate, the J is the destination neuron, I is the source neuron, delta J is the error function at the jth neuron, OI is the input arriving at the source end of the connection. So this is my picture. This is my picture. WJI. J is destination neuron, I is the source neuron. The amount by which this WJI is changed is learning rate into a quantity called delta J at the destination neuron and the output of the ith neuron. Okay, and this is called the universal weight change rule in neural network. Universal weight change rule in the neural network. Okay, whatever with the model, whether it is backpropagation or neocognitron or Hopfield net or softmax based expression, anything, any neural network fundamentally has this weight change rule. Okay, all weights essentially change by this principle or some minor variation thereof. And this delta J is nothing but the difference from the target behavior into derivative of the nonlinearity. In this case, the nonlinearity is the sigmoid neuron. So for outermost layer, this is the expression you get. For the hidden layers, since the target value is not available at the hidden layer, therefore you have to make the backpropagation rule applicable here and get the expression in terms of the delta value at the next higher layer. So this is a recursive operation. Okay. So now this becomes a very well understood procedure and easy to implement also, unlike a bit cumbersome the CRF or maximum entropy Markov model training scheme. You applied a very similar thing for support vector machine when you were doing the support vector machine based part of speech tagging exercise. So I illustrate backpropagation by what is called the XOR neural network. The input is x1 and x2 and output is y. So the XOR network has the property that if the inputs are different, then the output is 1. If the inputs are same, the output is 0. So this is the opposite of the equivalence function. The input values are 0 and 1. So when I give these input values here, there are 4 possible input values: 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1. I expect the output to be 0, 1, 1, 0. Okay, and I initialize the weight values here in the neural network, give the input, observe the output, find that there is a difference in the output from the target, backpropagate that error, change the weight values accordingly, and go on doing this iteratively. After some time, I do not find any change in the weight value, and the error also has fallen below a particular level that I have decided, and that is the end of the training. Okay, the same gradient descent algorithm is operative for maximum entropy Markov model training, CRF training also. This method is Also very similar to the support vector training, where iteratively a hyperplane is placed to separate the positive examples from the negative examples. Only thing is that the distance of the hyperplane from the positive class and negative class, the combined distance, should be maximum. Okay, that is the constraint that support vector machine insists on. So these are the ideas which are used for iteratively training a machine learning model for doing sequence to sequence labeling. Deep neural networks do it in a slightly different way, very similar to what is done in backpropagation. So now, of course, here we will be doing the assignment, the chunking assignment, which will be properly described to you, and then you will get more insight into how the algorithm works. You are, of course, free to use the tools like mallet or conditional random field tools, but do be very clear about the theory by doing the exercises, and such things will be also asked in the examination, your homework, test, and so on. Okay, the test that you are taking. So at this point of time, I think I will take the questions and see what are people asking.
Okay, so the first question is by Indrajit.
Hmm.
We have only modeled conditional probability from MEMM. How to find the expectation with respect to joint probability distribution for any feature from the model? Is the probability distribution for history also modeled?
So this is the modeling, and the question is, how do I get the expected value of these feature functions? Okay. So now we know that joint probability can be converted into conditional probability by applying Bayes theorem. So probability of A comma B is probability of A into probability of B given A. Okay. So the question I think of Indrajit is that we have probability of Ti given Hi, whereas the expectation seems to be in terms of uh, joint occurrence of Ti and Hi. So probability of Ti Hi, and here also probability P tilde Ti Hi. Okay, so there is a notational difference. So that is the question. Is that the question, Indrajit?
Yeah, that is the question.
Okay, that is the question. So please look up the paper by Tutanova and Manning, and also paper by McCallum, which I have placed on the WhatsApp, and also TAs have placed them in Teams and Moodle, and see how probability of TIHI is converted to conditional probability. Okay, see how they do it. And the next question was?
Is the probability distribution for history also modeled?
Probability distribution for history. No, there is no separate probability distribution for history. The history is either through this joint probability PTI-HI or through the conditional probability PTI given HI. Okay. There is no separate distribution for history.
Right. Harshit asked a very brief question. This is softmax question mark. I think what he meant is this softmax?
Oh, is this softmax? Yes, it is. Yes, it is softmax, and I think yeah, it is softmax, and I think we'll have to deal with softmax quite a lot. Yes.
Right.
Now, an interesting question is, why is it called softmax? Okay. And what is the difference between hardmax and softmax? So hardmax deals with ones and zeros, or 1 minus 1. Softmax deals with graded values, okay, ranging from, let's say, 0 to 1. All values are possible, and then you take maximum for classification decision, or if you are required to take multiple outputs, then you apply the ranking values.
Okay, sir. The next question is by Mohammad Ali Rehan. Which is better, taking a gradient descent step for each example or taking one step for a batch of examples? The latter seems more robust with respect to outliers.
Okay, so again a good question, and we will have to face this question when we do neural network training. So now let us take that XOR problem, okay, which I had shown on the screen. So the XOR problem, I have here 4 patterns for 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, and 1, 1, 0. There are 4 patterns. Now, should I change the weight values for every pattern, or should I change after looking at the whole epoch? Whole epoch means all the 4 patterns together. Okay, so if I post the changes in the weights after looking at all the patterns, this is called batch learning. Okay, and if I post the change after every single pattern, this is called incremental learning. So incremental learning is also called online learning, and batch mode of learning is also called offline learning. Now, which one is better? Okay, so it depends a lot on the problem requirement, the style of the machine learning person, the convenience. Now, if you are required to make a decision at every incremental change, then obviously you will have to do online learning. So how do you encounter such situations? Where does such situations come? Okay, so such situations come, for example, in Google's map. Okay, Google's map. So I'm driving the car and I'm looking at the map continuously for traffic condition, for jams on the road, and so on. So at every point, the scenario is changing. Okay, and there is incremental learning going on, and there I'll have to post the change. I'll do the parameter changing at every instance. Okay, at every instance where the instance is up to my time frame. Whereas if I'm let's say doing face recognition, okay, for a huge database, there is no time dependent change. Okay, and the whole corpus is given to me. There I would like to do batch based learning or offline learning. And you're saying that the batchline mode of operation is more robust. More robust. Can you explain what you mean by more robust?
I was saying that if there was some example which was maybe wrongly classified, did not follow the truth, but in because there, like, if we have a batch, then there is more probability that there will be an average behavior shown by the batch.
Okay, so if you're talking about training or testing situation?
Training.
Training. Okay, so in training, what happens is that we try to reduce the error in every iteration, and ultimately we insist on a threshold for the error. The error should fall below the threshold, then we say that the algorithm has converged. So the error comes from misclassification. Okay, the instances are misclassified. So you are talking about robust training. That means the misclassification should be less, and if an instance has been classified wrongly, then it should get corrected as the training proceeds. In the next iteration, it should get corrected. So no, not really. I mean, intuitively, I don't see that happening, but I need to think about it. Yes, I need to think about it.
The next question is by Mohammad Ali Rehan again. What is O given I?
O given I. O given I is the output from the feeding neuron. So if I'm changing this weight value, then the output from the feeding neuron is OI.
Right. Kaveri asks, for pause feature engineering, you have mentioned feature related to chunking also, but in Brown corpus we have only pause tags but not chunk labeling. So should we ignore these features for pause tagging by SVM?
No, so you're solving for chunking. We thought we'll have a different
Separate.
data,
So,
separate. So there will be separate data for this.
the feature I think she's talking about is prefixing and suffixing, and that's not really chunking feature. That's called stemming. So you use a
Yeah.
stemmer and you stem the word and get the prefix and suffix, and you use those. The presence of suffix and prefix as a feature. So we have not said that you use chunking based features. We have said that you use stemming based features. And
Actually, there is nothing called chunking based feature.
yeah. So
Okay. You are doing chunking, and the features are coming from lower level NLP stack. The features are pause tags are features, and the parts and properties of words are features.
right.
Kaveri, is that the question, or you have something else?
Yes, sir. In that slide, you have given the two features, that is chunk factor of previous word that will take values 1 and 0, and the previous to previous chunk factor. So I didn't understand what is chunk factor there.
Chunk factor, okay.
Yeah.
The chunk labels, okay. So you will be given training data for chunking, and the previous to previous level, and so you're talking about training or testing. If you're testing, then whatever you have chunked so far will be used for the current position. Okay.
No, sir, that feature. So we have mentioned total, I think 1,900 something features.
Right.
So in that first compartment, we are doing the current word vector, and then previous to previous. Similarly, for pause also, the sixth compartment is for current POS, and the seventh is for previous POS. Similarly, for 11th and 12th, there is chunk factor for previous word, and the 12th is previous to previous chunk factor for word. So I am confused there because we in Brown corpus we only have POS tagging or the labeling.
No. For chunking, you will have a different corpus altogether.
Okay, so we can ignore this features for POS tags, right?
No, you cannot ignore. So the corpus that will be given will have chunk and pause both.
Okay.
And the morphological feature, I think you will have to get from the stemmers and other things. That will depend on what feature set you decide to use.
Yes, sir.
And remember one thing: the features engineering that was done elaborately is a kind of comprehensive exercise. So you should take a subset of those features, and if you obtain very high accuracy above 95%, then be satisfied with that feature set. Achha, the other point, the more important point is that pause and chunk will help you in testing, of course. The morphological features are more helpful for handling data sparsity. If you have not seen a word in the training data, but the word appears in the testing corpus, then the morphological features become helpful. Okay?
Right.
Okay, thank
The
you.
next question is by Bara Fazili sir. Which one is better for parameter estimation of MEMM, gradient descent or generalized iterative scaling? This is from the paper.
Yeah. So the feeling in the community from various experiences is that gradient descent outperforms all these other techniques.
Right. And the follow-up question is GIS applicable for chunking also?
Yes, GIS is applicable for chunking also. Uh, in any situation where the probability is modeled by means of features and the weight values of the features, the weight values have to be learned iteratively. Okay, there GIS is applicable.
Right. Shivani asks, so the weights learned in the parametric algos denote the weight/importance of each feature. Similarly, can the weights learned in neural network be logically thought of as representing something?
Yes, so you're asking a question on a very hot topic these days that is called explainability. So when a neural network is arriving at a decision with respect to sentiment, machine translation, question answering, etc., we would like to ask the neural network, why did you decide that? And it is becoming more and more important because deep neural networks are being used in legal domain, health domain, where before taking the decision of the neural network, we want to be convinced that it is really correct. And what is it based on? So the parameter values of the neural network, that is the weight values of the neural networks, decide the decision of the neural network. So what these weights represent becomes important. Now, this question is little easier for input layer. In the input layer, the inputs are given and the weight values which are high for a particular input neuron, that neuron is important for the problem. So for example, you are doing loan sanctioning, then you have factors like age, income, location, and so on. Now suppose you find that the neuron corresponding to age has very high weight. Then we know that loan making decision is giving importance to age parameter. Okay, so that's how it comes about. It falls in the domain of explainability.
Right. Now, Bara Fazili asks, could you please restate what you said about parameters of the distribution versus parameters of the model? Is it just that the latter is only an estimation of the former in case of a parametric model?
Oh, okay. Yes. So that's again a nice question. So, so we have so I said that there are three components in any machine learning situation. The data, in our case for NLP, the data is text typically. A model, let's say the model is the support vector machine, and a distribution, underlying distribution. I do not know what the distribution is. Okay. So if the distribution is, let's say, normal, then the parameters would be mean and standard deviation. The support vector machine weights will be the parameters of the model. Now, do the weight values approximate the parameters of the underlying distribution, or what is the relationship between the model parameters, that is the weight values, and the parameters of the underlying distribution? What is the connection between them? So that's a very very involved and deep question. I don't think there is any paper or any strong result linking the parameters of the distribution with the parameters of the model.
We have just had one more question from Bara Fazili, and I think this should be the last question. Tagging from the pen tag set, which tag would be assigned to are in the sentence, they are not here? There is no separate tag for the corresponding verb be in third person present for the non-singular plural case. Do we assign the base form VB?
Okay, VBZ is for single. The question is for plural, what do we do? Okay, I see. Yeah, I think we'll have to assign VB only. Yes. Yeah. And in the universal tag, I don't think there is distinction between singular and plural.
Okay, sir, I think that these were the questions.
Okay, then thank you.